Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Day 2 of the NFSP Annual Conference 2024. Good morning and welcome. This morning we kick off with the question time panel, and I'm delighted to announce on stage, would you please give a big warm Warwick welcome to Minister Kevin Hollinrake, Nick Read, Calum Greenhow, Darren Burns and Tim Boothman. So ladies and gentlemen, this is a new venture for us in terms of the conference, the question time panel. So again, please give a big warm back on stage, your chair, Mr. Tim Boothman.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Well, you're all looking very bright. I trust that you took my advice and got up at 6 o'clock this morning, went for a little run. I think this mic's a little bit... Can you just tone it down a bit? Is that okay? I trust that you went for a little run, you went for a little swim, went to the gym, had your breakfast, and here you are. I can't really see any hangovers anywhere. Sorry about that, you didn't drink enough. So, never done this before, first time ever at conference, a question time panel. I felt it's really important that everybody, got to challenge the people here today. And the main purpose of today is to have, as it were, a grown-up adult conversation about the way forward for the post office network. There is, unfortunately, a lot of negativity out there in the press at this moment in time with events at the inquiry and everything else that's going on. But actually, what we need to focus on is what's actually, the way forward. We, obviously, as you'll know, we invited questions to be submitted. And thank you, everyone who submitted questions. We had around about 40 questions. And there was 3 main themes that ensued. First of which is the strategy going forward for the network, obviously, very important. Members would like to know what the network will look like in a year's time, 2 years' time, 5 years' time, even 10 years' time. The second subject is restoration of the post office brand. With all what's happened of late, the brand has actually taken hit after hit after hit. We're not here to discuss whose fault it is, if it's anybody's fault. What we're here to discuss is how do we restore that brand for our postmasters and the general public. The second one is, probably you've guessed, the ethics and culture within the post office network. So I'll sit down and we'll carry on. One thing I will add is I will be calling people the questions. Those people know who they are. They've got the questions in front of them. But as the debate ensues, feel free to stick your hand up. I can't promise to come to everyone, but hopefully as many as you possibly can will get to answer questions. And also please be very respectful for these 4 people who have agreed to come and answer your questions. So we will kick off. Theme 1 is strategy for the future of the network, and that is Andrew from the Northwest. Please stand up and ask your question.
My first question is for Nick. Your vision for the post office on the road to 2025 will come into view over the course of this year. What is your assessment of it to this point, and when will we all see what is planned beyond 2025 to give us all the long-term security that we all want?
Great question, and a good one to start with. I think when I first joined the post office in 2019, I was very clear that what we wanted to do in terms of our intent to 2025 was technology, branch profitability, and restoring postmaster trust. They were the core drivers that I described in 2019. I think no one can be in any doubt that the events of the past 18 months in particular have made and challenged exactly what we had set out to try and achieve. There could be no doubt about that, and I wouldn't sit here and pretend otherwise. So what does that mean in practice, and what does that mean that we are trying to achieve? I think the reality is, and I've said it a number of times over the last 18 months, we have to address the past if we are to move forward. And I don't believe that until we have done that, we will be able to move this brand forward. So for me, it is essential that we support the inquiry over the next 6 to 8 months so that it concludes and concludes quickly. And secondly, that obviously we fix the issue of redress and ensure that compensation is paid. I think until those two are completed, it will be difficult for us as a business to move forward. I think that is relatively well understood, and I'm also very clear that the brand will not be able to rejuvenate until such time as we've done that. But that will be this year, so I think we need to be really, really clear about that. That is happening in 6 to 8 months, and we mustn't just wait and suddenly discover on the 1st of November, gosh, where are we going? So what are we doing in between? You'll be very aware that we've had a new appointment of a chair, and the new chair is very keen to do a strategic review of the business. I think that's absolutely right. Why is it right? Well, it's right for a number of reasons. One, clearly it's very evident that we will have a change, or not necessarily a change, but we will have a new administration of some description in the next 6 to 8 months or so. With that will come a new funding investment in the post office. There'll be a new funding round. And at the same time, we will conclude the inquiry. So there is a real necessity to do a strategic review, and I think it is the right thing to do, and we will push on and do that. So I guess there is room for optimism. I'm very clear in my own mind that it has been extremely difficult for the brand. It's been extremely difficult for the business, and we need to get through. We will not be able to move forward until such time as we've addressed the past. And I think certainly the work that Minister Hollinrake has done, particularly on compensation, will put us in a position where we will be able to do that, because I think we've made some dramatic strides in that process over the last 4 months or so.
Thank you, Nick. What I think a lot of members will want to know is, what will the network look like physically in the next 2 or 3 years? Will there be so many mains? Will there be so many locals? Will there be so many drop and collects? What actually will be the structure of the network going forward? What is the aim?
Well, I think that's the point of doing a strategic review. As it stands today, I am contracted and I am instructed by statute to have 11,500 branches across the network. And that's not going to change anytime soon until we have either some form of formal consultation or indeed that we have some change in statute. So that's not changing. So we shouldn't expect today to have a different size and shape of network. What we are doing, obviously, is trying to make sure that we meet demand within the context of 11,500, which is why we have 687 new drop and collects, and they obviously count towards the 11,500, which is why we're obviously reducing the number of outreaches, which are extremely expensive, and looking for different ways to manage our rural and isolated communities, which I think is absolutely the right thing to do. But we've got to follow consumer demand, and we've got to make sure that within the construct of 11,500, we do just that. Now, if we have a strategic review, if we play back the shareholder and the business in working together to produce the strategic review, come up with a set of principles and priorities that means that we should go out and consult, then of course we'll do that. But as I say, that will be something that will presumably come to fruition over the next sort of 6 to 8 months or so.
Thank you, Nick. Calum, how do you see our membership? How do you see our membership? How would you think that they would feel about that? Does that provide any reassurance, do you think? Or
well, I think, first of all, I think it's a great question, and I think it's a question that's on everybody's minds at this moment in time. As I look around the room, I see about 200 people who have invested their own money, and it is your own money, into this business. And I'm going to be respectful in the sense you're the only people that are actually investing in this business. Everybody else is investing in somebody else's money. But you're actually investing your own money, in this business. And therefore, you're looking for a return. Not only that, that investment, in essence, is your pension. Because as self-employed individuals, you don't get a company pension. So therefore, on that basis, what you're doing is you're investing in a business, you're hoping to make that grow, you're hoping to make sure that that asset appreciates in value so that there comes a point when you want to retire, you can sell that asset and actually you can live off of the proceeds of that. So anything that is actually going to compromise that is obviously going to be of a concern to you. You've got bills to pay. You've got staff to pay. You've got all of these statutory things that you've got to deal with. So it's really important that actually you are very much involved in any future strategy. And one thing I would say, it's totally understandable that the government is involved in the strategy of the post office going forward because it's the shareholder, it's the owner of the business, because the post office is owned by the government. It's right that the post office as the operator, in essence, is dealing with what that strategy is going to be. But there's a third group, and they are, with respect, the most important group, and that's you. What happens is government and the post office work together, they decide on what's going to happen, and you get told what's going to happen as far as your investment is concerned. Now, can you imagine if we're in a situation of a husband and wife, it's a partnership, all right? But actually, one individual makes all of the decisions and actually dictates to the other exactly what's going to happen. That partnership is not going to work. That's not going to be successful. It's not going to be conducive. It's going to break down. The reality, is that two people have got an intrinsic investment in that relationship being working as profitably or as successfully as it possibly can be. Every single one of you wants this business to work and wants this business to be successful. You want the post office to work. You want the post office to be successful, but too often you're dictated to as to what actually happens, rather than really being involved in the intrinsic decisions. And I think you will feel a lot more comfortable if we could actually work out how to do that in a constructive manner. So that's the way that I would see going forward. Yes, there will have to be changes. There has been changes in the past, and there will be changes in the future, because let's be honest, nothing stands still. But it's actually about how you can work to ensure that those changes are as beneficial to you as you possibly can. So that's what I would see.
Right, thank you, Calum. Well, we'll have to let the Minister reply to that.
Yeah, well, thanks, Tim. I absolutely believe, clearly the post office has got a past, and some of it has been a checkered past, but I think it's got a very, very bright future. And I'm not looking at that through rose-tinted spectacles. Prior to politics, I was in business myself. I agree with what Calum said. You're investing your own hard-earned money, and we've got to make it work for you. The business I had was a franchise business, so in many ways it's a similar relationship between the post office and yourselves. I had that kind of relationship too with our 220 franchisees. So I do understand it to some extent in terms of what you're sat there now thinking. And what we've got to get to, first and foremost, it's got to be a case of a decent postmaster in a decent location can make a decent living. That's what you've got to have. So the first thing to tackle is the brand. And Tim and I disagree a bit on this. I think the brand, although it's suffered its brickbats and its problems, at a local level, it's very, very highly regarded. I don't see anybody I speak to my colleagues all the time. I know whenever a post office is closing my patch, you get outcry from the local community. They love their post offices, they love their postmasters. So it's got a bright future in terms of brand. We have not got a damaged brand here. We need to change somehow. We just need to invest properly in that brand. And in terms of the future, the future's got to be to make branches more profitable. There's only two ways you can do that. You've got to drive revenue up and drive costs down. So driving revenue up, there's some really opportunities there. Clearly, consumer habits have changed. So very few of us in this room will actually use services the way we used to do in terms of applying for a driving license or applying for or getting your car tax. And people are doing that online. We can't get in the way of that. People want to do that. We've got to find other ways of driving revenue. Clearly, banking is a big opportunity. The banks have saved probably thick end of £3 billion a year by closing down their branches. They need to be paying a bigger share of those savings into the post office network to drive up revenue. Same with parcels and parcel hubs. Nick's got a great strategy in trying to drive more income through parcels. So all those things about driving income up. We've also got to make sure we drive costs down. Nick and I are very clear. That includes costs at the centre. So as money comes into the network, more it flows into the network itself in terms of individual businesses. But also I think we need to have a frank and open discussion about the size of the network, which will then clearly it's easier to have a profitable business if there are fewer businesses around you. So we need to have a conversation around that. Politically, that's a challenge. I say no member of Parliament wants to see post offices closing in their area, but we need to have a grown-up conversation about the size of the network going forward. And that's the opportunity Nick has now, and Calum and Tim and the team to work together with the new chair, who I regard very, very highly, Nigel Railton. Great background in terms of his commercial experience, a CFO, CEO experience, so he understands about businesses, but also his personal background, somebody who's worked hard, gone to night school to get on in life. He wasn't born with a silver spoon in his mouth. He's somebody I think you'll identify with very well. So I think Nick and Nigel working together on the strategic review in terms of revenue, those revenue and then cost level to make sure that you can run more profitable businesses going forward. That's a strategic review in a nutshell, is that you'll run more profitable business in a few years' time than you are doing now.
Right, thank you, Kevin. Question for Darren. Timpson Group over the years must have faced some challenges when it comes to its construct of its network, and now it's at 2,500 shops and other businesses. How does Timpson Group manage the necessary change with its organisation and structure to cope with consumer demand, etc.?
I think we've always evolved. So we're a long-standing UK service retailer. We've been about since 1865. We've continually added new services to our repertoire. But I think the reason that we've been able to kind of maintain our position on the high street, continue our success, is because we put our people first. So for us, culture, vision, values, all very, very important parts of the Timpson culture, and they're all pretty much embedded within our culture. So the reason that we're able to change so quickly is obviously one, we're an owner-occupied business, which is a huge benefit for us. But we are quite adapt to bringing on new forms of technology. We've just acquired a vending business. So you can see the future of keys is sort of moving away from the tangible old piece of metal that you're going to be putting in your lock. There's going to be different ways of securing your home, securing your car, etc. And we're at the forefront of that technology. But what we do is we bring our colleagues along with it. What we don't do is we just don't expect them to be on board initially with these changes that we make. We consult with our colleagues. We make sure that they're aware of what we do, and we make sure that they're involved and engaged in our future planning and succession planning, and we bring them on board that way.
All right, thank you, Darren. Can anybody hear me? Is this mic okay? I'm keep forgetting. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, let's move on. Next question from the floor. Tim Allen. Yeah, there's mic coming.
Hi, gents. I'm Tim Allen, Kington, Maine, which is in rural Herefordshire on the border with England and Powys, Wales. I want to know why there's no obvious talk about seeking restoration of government services. My belief is that to serve our communities well, we have to be relevant to people's needs. The fear people have about online fraud, as well as the digital vulnerability of much of our population, means that government should be willing to take another look at what the front door to government services means. Online is not a safe place. A huge number of people do not have the digital skills or confidence to actually go online. A huge number of people do not have the financial luxury of laptops and small devices. And on top of a reinstatement of government services, all banks, all utilities should be required to provide their customers with an option to come into a post office and pay their bills. And just in case you're wondering what has been taken away over the last few years, we've got HMRC personal tax payments, We've got TV licences, we've got bus passes, we've got transact payments including HMRC, we've got Department of Work and Pensions, we've got NSI services and premium bonds, we've got the health lottery, and we've got fishing licences and international driving permits last month.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Tim. Minister, your government services and the way that the government has adopted a policy of digital by default. Our members and certainly large parts of the community would always see the need for a customer-facing, personal need for a face-to-face. And how is any government going to actually, supply that to communities? It's a challenge, but I think it is actually a necessity for the general public to have a face-to-face access for government.
Well, we agree with that. It's not a case of, we're not trying to say all people should go online, not at all. Recently in Parliament, Tim, we legislated for access to cash, for example, to make sure people could access cash at a local level, to recognise that not everybody wants to shop online, not everybody just wants to use digital cash. So that's a permanent requirement, which does create opportunities for the post office network as well. The reality is consumer habits are changing. It's not us that are driving that, that's the consumer that's driving that. The rise of Amazon, I'm afraid it's not us that's allowing Amazon to deliver parcels to your home. That's what people choose to do. And we as a government won't stand in the way of that. And you may want us to, but I promise you we won't. I don't think any government in the world would stand in the way of that. Because those are consumer habits, and that's changing our high street. What we've got to do is try and find a future for our high street in the opportunities that do exist. And yes, people are moving online for certain services. I purchased my fishing license online. I mean, other people in this room may do themselves. So the reality is things have changed, but there are opportunities despite that change. And as I said before, around banking services, around parcels, there are still physical interactions that some consumers do still need. We do see a bright future. Clearly, there's got to be, because of the change, many of the businesses in this room will have diversified and want to try to help with that diversification. But yes, government services where people want them, but we can't dictate to consumers where they purchase those services if they want to purchase them in a different place.
Thank you, Minister. Calum, would you like to address some of Tim's points? Would you?
Yeah.
Anything to add?
Yeah. I'll slightly disagree, Minister, there on the basis that I do agree that actually consumer habits are changing, but I do believe that it's also being directed as well by chief executives and shareholders who are looking for profit and reduce their costs so they can increase their profits. If I take, for example, back in 2005, income from government services to post office was 596 million. Today it's less than, it's about 20 to 30 million pounds. So we've lost over £500 million. And yes, absolutely, some of that will have been as a result of changing customer habits. But let me give you another example. I was sitting in Gatwick Airport not so long ago, back in October, and I received a phone call from my eldest daughter to say that my youngest daughter had a car accident. My first question, is she okay? Yes, she's okay. And I said, there's a but in there. Yeah, she's crashed into the back of your car. So, of course, being dad, I owned both cars, so both my cars were involved in an accident and I wasn't even present. The kind of where I'm going with this is actually to deal with the insurance company. I couldn't actually deal with someone at the end of a phone. I could only deal with it via a chat box. I could only deal with it online. The stress that actually created, the amount of time that I actually had to take out of my day to actually deal with that and to get that sorted. It took months and months and months to get that sorted, whereas actually being able to speak to someone, I would have been able to sort it in 5 minutes. Chief executives and shareholders of companies don't want to actually deal with their customers. They want to deal with them remotely. They want to push them away, and that's the reality of it. But look there's over 200 people in this room. as human beings, from whether it's evolution or whether it's Adam, the reality is, as human beings, we are designed to interact with human beings. We're not designed to sort of interact sort of remotely sort of via a computer system. We need to deal with people online, and as Tim sort of is highlighting, around the country there are people who choose not to sort of go online because they don't trust online. To my belief, the tenner in your back pocket is much safer than the tenner in your bank account. There's nobody's really interested in the tenner in your back pocket, but they are interested in your bank account, and they will do everything they possibly can to get access into your bank account. So the more that we push for technology, not, in days gone by, you just had to sort of have a password. Now you have to have sort of, it's got to be 13 characters long. You've got to have special characters. You've got to have numbers sort of in it. Then you've got to have two-step authentication. What is next? And the reality is, I'm not James Bond. All I want to do is be able to access my bank account. All I want to be able to do is access whatever it is that I'm trying to do. But it's getting harder and harder and harder, and it's getting more and more frustrating as well. Let's get back to actually being able to communicate with people. The reality is, what does the post office bring? It brings social interaction to people who don't actually have social interaction. They have to get themselves up, they have to brush their hair, they have to give themselves a wash, they have to put their clothes on. They have to actually get out into the fresh air, and they have to speak to people. The more that we actually, we're talking about digital inclusion, but as human beings, we're actually becoming more and more excluded. The post office has actually got massive, massive mental and physical health benefits if actually people would actually look at it on that basis. And a lot of what the Timpson's sort of group is doing is about engaging sort of with people. Too many chief executives, too many shareholders today are actually trying to shove the customer away because they don't want to deal with them, and they want to process them via online because that's cheaper, and therefore they can make more profit.
Thank you, Calum. We'll probably just take a few questions from the floor. So, Martin. Is it Martin? No, Alan, sorry. Sorry about that.
Just 1 second.
Yeah, you need a mic, yeah.
Alan Knight, South East Region, Kent. I have to disagree with the Minister. You said that it's being driven by the public's choice. There is no choice. They're not given the option to come into the post office. You're taking that option away. If these so-called bill payments, and as you pointed out, you did your fishing license online, were you given the option to do your fishing license at a post office? You weren't. So you are taking those facilities away from us and away from the public.
It's a very interesting point, Alan, and I'm happy to take it away. It's I can't remember whether there was a choice or not, and I'm sure, as you say, there wasn't a choice. I can't say I would have used it if I had, but nevertheless, I believe in choice. I'm very happy to take that away and see what can be done in terms of providing people a choice for people in that situation.
And that goes to the same for all the lists that Tim read out there. All of those products that we used to do to drive footfall and make post offices productive, profitable, you're slowly but surely taking them away. And that, to me, is unacceptable for the future.
Okay. Right. Thank you, Alan. We'll take one more from John, and then I'll continue. John.
Yes, good morning, Conference. Good morning, Minister. I take your point very much that we're online. Lots of people are online. Lots of things are bought online. And that is a way forward. There is an alternative needed. What I'm finding in my post office is that people are coming to me in the expectation of help where they fail online. They want help with things like driving licenses. They want to talk to me about their passports. They even want to talk to me about lots of things which I have absolutely no knowledge about, like tax, identity cards, BRP and things like this. And I do think that I am providing unofficially quite an information service on behalf of His Majesty's government in these areas. And This is something which I don't think is recognised, that a lot of us are extremely well-respected pillars of the community. We're on the high street. We walk down our high streets and people are saying hello to us. My area at the moment is, I was going to say a dumping ground for migrants. A lot of these people coming to the country expect us, as a post office, to be a part of government. They expect to get the information required from me. We say to them, go online, and they say, how? So I do think that whilst there is this drive online, whilst I see the necessity, and I'm as guilty as anybody else, sitting there with my tablet, ordering stuff from Amazon, I still think there is a need for those people who don't have that facility to have somewhere to go. And I do think that as a social benefit of the post office, this is somewhat overlooked.
Thank you, John. A quasi-government problem shop. That's how I describe my office. Constantly. I tried to do this online, and I phoned them up, and they told me to come into you. We've all heard it. In some ways, you could look at it that, oh, I wish they didn't do that. But in another way, you'd look at it, actually, there's a need there. There's actually an opportunity. For the post office network to become part of government, part of a customer-facing place where people can just come for that bit of advice. There's actually an opportunity there. But I'll come on to Nick. I think with the strategy going forward, you could have a network by design, and you could have so many locals, you could have so many mains. It's pointless unless it's viable. So how is the actual post office going to ensure that the network is viable going forward? Because if it's not, we're all independent, self-employed business people. We're not working as a charity. We're a business. So how is the post office and government going to address that?
I've got a couple of thoughts on that. I think everybody be aware that the top line of the post office broadly hasn't changed in the last 10 years, but the way that the revenue is generated has changed markedly, which I think is a reflection on the fact that as a group within the post office, we have managed to adjust and to adapt, as the Minister rightly pointed out, to consumer demand as it's changed. And we will have to continue to do that. And I think it's really important that we don't remain wedded to and bedded in the past. And it was great that Sir Ed Davies said the post office is going to be the front office of government in 2010. But if you look at the shape of the revenue that was generated in 2010 compared to today in 2024, it is markedly different. You're absolutely right. There has been a marked decline in what I would call government services. We generate literally 30 million now. However, there have been other opportunities, and we've done a sterling job in terms of the three core product areas. I always talk about mails and parcels, I always talk about cash and banking, and I talk about travel. We've had a fantastic 3 years on bill payments. I recognise that that is likely to come to an end with the end of energy payments and the like. But at the same time, we have a growing online business as well, and we're recognising that we have enormous trust from consumers. And I agree with the Minister on this. I don't think the brand has been terminally damaged. I really don't, and we'll come and talk about that a bit later, I'm sure. And so I'll park my thoughts on that for a moment. However, what we have done very well is pivot into different areas. You know our strategy around multi-carrier, our strategy around multi-propositions, and our strategy around multi-channel for mails and parcels. We're adjusting to the fact that people want to send parcels. We're adjusting to the fact that actually we're seeing a decline in consumer mail. And I think we're doing it really very effectively with Every, with DPD, and with others. And everybody in this room is playing their part, and I think we will find ourselves migrating to being a genuine hub on the high street. Others are closing. Even Simpsons and others are closing on the high street. We have a fabulous role to play in terms of our social purpose, and that's what we've been talking about now recently, but also as a community hub. We will be attracting people. So I think driving footfall, and different footfall, I may hasten to add, particularly through Every, a much younger population coming into our branches, I think that's a fantastic place to be for the longevity of the post office. And secondly, in and our development of cash and banking. We've talked about it a little bit this morning so far. We will be the arbiters of cash. We will be the individuals that will look after and manage cash for the nation. £66 billion worth of cash gets generated and transitioned through our network every single year. We have a unique position, and we will be the guardians and the infrastructure supporting cash. And what's more, during Banking Framework 4, and the Minister and I have a lot of conversations about this, we will ensure that the banks pay for that. And we will make sure that during the Banking Framework 4 negotiations, which kick off in June, which we've been doing a lot of prep for, we will be making sure and holding to account those banks through the Treasury, through the Department, to make sure that they pay for an investment into our post office network so that we can continue to do that for the next 5, 10, 15 years, however long it is. I can talk about travel, and I will definitely talk about our online business. It's very, very, very evident, even in the last 4 months, given what we've been through at the inquiry, there hasn't been a drop-off in footfall. People are coming into our branches. 9.5 million came in last week, 10 million the week before. It's fantastic. The relationship that you build with local communities is astonishing. I won't pretend that it's not good at a corporate level. Of course it's not good. But that doesn't seem to be affecting the way that consumers believe they have a relationship with you, the postmaster population, and you, what you do in your local communities. And I think that's absolutely fantastic. And we mustn't do anything to change that, because it's a tremendous place to be.
Thank you, Nick. Just as a matter of interest, Darren, going back to opportunities and looking at products, how does Timpson Group identify new products and services in its branches? How do you go about? Do you actually go out procuring them? Could you explain that process?
Often it's led by our colleagues. So if our colleagues can identify demand from their customers, and again, similar to the post office, we are effectively, I mean, I wouldn't say we're community hubs like you guys. However, we're very big on our customer relationships. Our tagline as a business is great service by great people. So we really encourage our staff to engage with our customers, to inquire about the weather, the family, what the pet dog might be called. So we're really big on that sort of customer engagement, and it's all important to us. The feedback that we get from our customers is that our colleagues provide first-class customer service, which is something we're very proud of. But yeah, to answer your question, Tim, I think it's all due to our colleagues. The example I gave yesterday when I was chatting was when we began to repair watches. This all came from one of our customers coming in and saying, I know it's not a service that you provide, but can you add a battery to my watch? Can you change the strap? And the whole watch repair business grew from there, and it's our third most profitable service now that we offer within the group. Obviously, we've got people within our HQ, Timpson House, who will go out and will sort of look for new ideas, new technology. Technologies, it's coming. Our business now is people always like the face-to-face interaction. You can't get your shoes repaired online, thankfully. So we're never going to lose that. But in terms of keys in the future, people are going to be able to get the keys cut in a vending machine, and some of our other services will not go online per se, but technology will play a big part. But I think we should never lose sight of the importance of that personal interaction.
Thank you, Darren. Very quickly, Calum, can you see from a Federation perspective how Federation could be involved in that type of process?
Well, as far as the development of products and services?
Yes.
Well, I mean, one of the things, and actually, we're going to, part of the reason why we're going to do this afternoon is, as I look around this room, there's vast amount of experience of people who have ran and operated businesses at the coalface. So what we're going to do this afternoon is actually tap into your wealth and experience and give you the opportunity to actually talk things through. And actually, I don't think there is enough of that that's actually being done sort of within the network. And actually, I think that's something that we need to, in essence, the three of us need to be doing. Government, the post office, and postmasters need to be sort of working together to find out exactly, as Darren sort of explained, sort of what are the new services that we actually need to provide. Again, sort of too often, sort of actually decisions are being made, and in one sense, one of the things I keep on saying, decisions are made by people sort of are so far removed from the decisions they make that it makes the decisions null and void. You're the people at the coalface. You're the people who actually know exactly what's going on as far as that customer interaction is concerned. But actually, it's not about statistics. It's about the person, as Darren sort of said. The name of the person's dog. I always describe the fact that I've known people since there were bumps in their mummy's tummies. And then they were sort of in the pram, then they were then were the first day at school, then the first day at high school, then they were heading off to university, then they've come back to the community, they're now parents themselves. That's who we know, and we actually know the stories behind the statistics. And quite often, sort of, I feel within the corporate world, it's all about statistics. Well, statistics can be sort of anything, but I think sort of actually need to have more interactions like this, where we're actually, it's not just about focus groups, it's about actually tapping into your wealth and knowledge and experience to be able to find out where we can actually take the business forward. And it might be that we do need to have a change of the actual structure of the network. You know, I've been in the business since 1995. I've seen many sort of changes in that. In essence, the business shouldn't sort of and it be in existence, but because of you, because of the connection that you have with your communities, it still is here and it's still surviving. But what about sort of tomorrow? And I think you are the answer to actually what we need to do tomorrow, but too often you're told rather than engaged.
We quite understand this at the moment. It's seen to be an organisation where the network, the sharp end, things are done to it rather than with it. And so different models of governance. It's no secret that I'm a big fan of mutualised businesses where in the right kind of, where the right opportunities are there. And I think there's potential opportunity here. So that is definitely on the table in terms of how you improve governance or just make sure the stakeholders, the most important stakeholders, have a better say in what goes on. The other point, just touch on Darren's point about automated vending machines for things like keys. There's clearly productivity is important to you as well. So clearly it's a service industry, so labour costs are high in your businesses, and things like national living wage have made that even more difficult. I fully recognise that, but we've got to look at ways of trying to automate processes that are currently done on a manual basis. Cash counting is an obvious one. The replacement for Horizon should be a productivity tool rather than simply a kind of digital filing cabinet. But also things like self-service terminals. We're used to using these things in supermarkets now, and could we look at those kind of things in terms of the network? For me, in terms of government, there will always be constraints on money, but investment's an easier case to make than recurrent cost. So if there's a shorter-term capital investment that allows for automation within your businesses that makes sense for you, that make you more profitable, that's something we should definitely consider.
No, I agree, and we certainly as part of Banking Framework 4, we're expecting banks to support and pay for automation, so enhance post offices in terms of security and automation particularly. We're looking obviously at mails and parcels automation and how that will play a part. And MBIT, you're absolutely right, Minister, we anticipate that we will reduce our operating costs both in branch and in the centre by anything up to 50% by introducing a system that's going to genuinely and dramatically reduce the processing time and cost time associated with running a branch. That's a core part of the way forward. And we have to embrace it, and it's important to embrace it. It is your single biggest cost, and we need to make sure that we make it as simple and as uncomplex as possible.
Right, thank you. Just one thing. You've mentioned a strategic review. Could you give the members an assurance that the Federation and postmasters will be part of that review?
Absolutely, 100%.
How will you do that?
Well, I mean, for forums like this, for starters, I think hopefully Tim and you, Calum, and other members of the network, I've never been afraid of engaging with whatever organisations represent postmasters and indeed postmasters themselves. So it's a given. It would be foolish not to engage with the people that really know what's going on, the people who work at the sharp end in our communities.
Well, I think you'll find that Calum will hold you to that. One last question on this subject from the gentleman with the grey jacket. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Raj and I'm from Dartford. I run a local post office which is open till 8 o'clock, so customers can access post office services till 8 in the evening, six days a week. We open on Sunday as well, which is till 4 o'clock. So we are providing valuable service to community 7 days a week. But what I've noticed is local postmasters like me across country are not paid enough or equal as the main branch postmasters, because we do the same job, but we get paid less. Who's going to bridge these gaps? How are we going to make those branches profitable? And how are we going to remove this unjust discrimination of payment?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
I'm not going to suggest that everything associated with the strategic review is going to solve all problems and address all issues. I mean, as people probably know, this is the locals versus mains question. It's been around for a long time. The way that we diagnose the difference between a local and a main, as most people will recognise, is due to customer demand, but it's also due to the access to particular services depending on the environment that they're operating in. And that's very, very important. At the same time, the operating costs of distributing and delivering the scale of the 162 products associated with a main, as well as the constraints that we invite people to have, the multitude of counters that we have, the space that's required, the queuing that's required. There are certain underlying fundamentals that go into the cost base of a main that simply don't exist for locals. So that is the basis of it. I'm not saying for a moment that that is 100% right, but we will, as part of this process, review that in exactly the same way, because clearly the shape of the network is going to be important, not just the actual number of 11,500. We all know we've got locals, we've got mains, we've got outreaches, we've got drop and collect, a number of different formats. What is the right format for the post office going forward? That will be a core part of the review that we do. But as I say, at the moment, the basis for local and main is done on particular access to services, on the customer demand of that local area, but fundamentally on the cost of the space that's required to deliver the services. And if there are specifics, then of course we can talk about specifics, and I know that the team here will be very happy to pick that up with individuals in the room.
Thank you, Nick. Thanks, everyone. We'll move on to as next topic is, and we've already touched on it, and about restoration of the brand. There's obviously been already some conflicting views, but can we kick off with a question from Alison Bell, who's sadly not here, but Naina is going to ask the question on her behalf.
Hi, I'm Naina Ardeshna, Midland region, and I run a branch not far from here, Leamington Spa. This question is on behalf of Alison, who couldn't be here. I would like to know what the post office government intend to do about the post office brand. They have killed the brand, devalued our business, and made it impossible to sell. What are they proposing to protect our investment in the government-owned business?
Thank you, Naina. I mean, Nick and Minister, as you'll know, traditionally, post offices were quite a lucrative. They were quite a lucrative business, and they were actually, traded on the open market as a commodity. Now it would seem that we can't actually give them away, let alone sell. So, for the investment that us as self-employed business people have put into the network, how do we actually realise that? And when it comes to selling on and we want to give up, how is the post office and government going to ensure that? And I know it's not entirely, but it actually should at very least be a name, and it should be at very least involved in the strategy going forward. Because if no one would want to invest money into the network if they couldn't then, when they wanted to move on, get that money back out.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. But that's back to making sure profitable businesses. People invest because they get a rate of return on their investment. So if you're not getting a rate of return on your investment, people won't invest. So the businesses are less valuable. So that feeds right back into what we were saying about making sure that it's got the post office themselves, individual post office level, so a decent postmaster in a decent location makes a decent living. That will always be a valuable business on that basis. Totally get the fact that there has been damage to the brand at the centre, at the government level, if you like, at the shareholder level, in terms of the way the post office has been managed in the past. And we're dealing with that through the inquiry, we're dealing with that through compensation, and doing what we've never done before in terms of overturning convictions by statute. So about 700 people will have their names cleared on that basis, quite rightly. So by the end of this year, most of those things will be out of the way. The inquiry will report early next year. Most of those things will be out of the way. There will be the job of somebody being held to account for it, which I've gone on record saying somebody should be held to account for it, ideally by some kind of prosecution. So all those things have got to happen as well alongside it. But it's my view, certainly at a local level, post offices are very highly valued parts of our communities. So as long as they are valuable in terms of profitability, then they will have a value in terms of running a business and selling a business.
Thank you. Well, let's go down a different route then. So you would say that the brand is not damaged. Probably most in the room would disagree to that. But because it's a case that how would you see it, Calum? Is it a case of confidence to make people want to come into the network? Is it a case that?
Well, I think I understand sort of where you're going, and whilst the Minister is absolutely correct, so like actually if you're providing a profitable business, then naturally people are wanting to invest in it and want to sort of buy it. Problem sort of like is that this is not, once, and whilst, and I really appreciate everything you're doing, Minister, in relation to sort of the past, and sort of is certainly the quashing of the convictions, absolutely right. It's unfortunate in one sense that didn't happen in 2019, and it's taken to 2024, and if I may, it's taken a TV programme to actually provide you with the ability to be able to do that. But, just outside this building is the Warwickshire Business School. The next generation of business leaders will learn about how not to do governance, and post office will be used as an example. The next generation of lawyers will be trained in how you should not behave as a lawyer as a result of the post office. This is not something that is going to disappear once Wynne delivers his report, so whenever that will be. This is something that's going to be talked about in 10 years. This is something that's going to be talked about in 100 years. I believe this is something that's going to be talked about in 1,000 years. The post office will never escape from the Horizon scandal. It will be there forever. This is one of the seminal moments in British history. The fact that actually, and I'm going to be quite strong here, government ministers were involved in this. Senior civil servants were involved in this. Captains of industry in relation to the post office, Fujitsu and Royal Mail were involved in this. The British legal industry were involved in this. If you put them all together, collectively, that is the leadership of the United Kingdom. And what it fundamentally suggests is there is a cultural problem at the very top of our society that actually enabled and allowed that and obfuscated and did everything it possibly could to cover it up. Okay? So this is not something that we will actually just be able to forget in a year or two. This is something that's going on. And here's the other thing. Because of that, it's not just about the money. People aren't going to invest in this just because they can make some money. Why would they want to work with the post office? That's the thing. Are people going to be put off because of all of this that's gone on in the past? Is it a case that they want to be in partnership with the post office? That's the big thing. Are they willing to invest in the post office? That's the big thing. And when Tim says, if we can't even give our post offices away, then the reality is that actually there's something in that. We've got people who are in the hard to place, and there's 12 people have recently dropped out. There was 12 people who were willing to take on a hard to place post office, but they've dropped out. Did they drop out because actually of everything that's going on? Because actually they kind of looked at it and went, I don't want to get involved in that business. That's the aspect that we need to deal with. And I'm sorry that kind of seems quite negative and it seems quite, but we've really got to get over that. Yes, there is a phenomenal trust in you as postmasters. Yes, there is a phenomenal understanding from the general public as to what you've experienced. But the only way that we're going to sort of actually get beyond this is if there is a fundamental change in the whole structure so that actually the general public and you as postmasters can actually sort of have the confidence. One of the things that Darren talked about is the number of people that actually come and work for Timpson's because their colleagues within Timpson's encouraged their friends to come and work for them. That's the advocacy that we need. Now, here's the thing. If we're really sort of honest, would any of you tell any of your friends to invest in a post office? That's what we need to change. That's what we need to change. Because if you, in essence, the people who are running, you're the ones where the trust is in, but if you wouldn't sort of encourage your friends to sort of take on a post office, why should anybody else? If we can change that so that you're actually shouting out that the post office is a fantastic brand to be involved in, it's a fantastic company to sort of deal with, then people are going to want to come into that business. And that's what we've got to change.
Right, thank you, Calum. Let's just have a slight difference. If you were to take your corporate head off, Nick, how would you feel about that on a personal level? If you just forget your position, you forget that you're here to represent Post Office Limited, give a personal overview and your own thoughts on what's just been said.
We are in the eye of the storm. I wouldn't pretend anything other. We are in the eye of the storm, and we will be for the next 6 to 8 months. I think it will get worse in terms of the media assessment of what happened historically, and I don't see any time soon that changing. So that's being very candid. What does that mean? That means 2 or 3 things. One, we as the Post Office have got to ensure that Sir Win Williams gets to the right answer, that he does and is able to genuinely identify what happened in the past, why it happened, who was responsible, and more importantly, give us the opportunity to move on as a business. I've been very clear, I said at the start, we can't move on until that happens. And so my job is not to delay in any way the compensation we pay, not to delay in any way the disclosure and support we provide to Sir Win. We need him to conclude, and to conclude conclusively and transparently. It's only then that I think the business will be able to move forward more clearly and more transparently itself. And I think that's going to be really very, very important. But as we said at the start, we need to make sure that strategically we're clear what we're doing, and that's what we are. We're going about our strategic review, and we will make sure that they coincide sometime in November, and we'll be in a position to launch the business again, because I do believe that that's what we will need to do. But I do hear it, and I think it must be extremely galling, as it is for us. It's an appalling set of principles that have occurred over the last 15 years. I think all of us are horrified by what we've seen, all of us are horrified by what we've heard, and it's my job to make sure that the Post Office fit for purpose by the time that we come through this. And that clearly means supporting Sir Win to get to the right answer, and clearly means supporting Sir Win to ensure that we don't walk past allegations, we don't walk past things that have gone wrong in the business, and we make sure that you have the confidence in the corporate brand so that you can move forward. That's absolutely essential. My observations with consumers, interestingly, they can hold 2 things in their hands at the same time. They can see how appalling the last 15 to 20 years has been, but they can also see what an extraordinary relationship they have at the grassroots level. That's why 10 million people still walk into our branches every week. That's why people still come onto the online channel. I didn't think they would. I thought the one thing that would happen is that our online business would fall off a cliff. I thought people would turn around and go, well, I don't have a relationship with the online post office business, and so actually I can go elsewhere. It hasn't happened. 1.9 million customers still came onto our website last week. They still want to transact with us because there is an enduring brand here that has gone and lasted for 360 years. No question, we're in a bad and tight spot at the moment. I do believe, genuinely believe, that we will come through that because I think there is an enduring brand that sits within it. If you're BP and you had your crisis in the Mexico, then sure, people will look at that and go, it took them a long time to recover. It does. And I spend a lot of time talking to corporate businesses that say, how long does it take to recover from the nada when you're actually right in it? And people do talk about 2 to 3 years. And I've done that on a couple of businesses I've been out to ask about, when you have this sort of corporate calamity, how long does it take to rejuvenate and regenerate? We've got a minister and we've got a government that wants the post office to succeed. We've got a team that is broadly new in the post office. I didn't have anybody on my board that was around in 2019. I don't have anybody in the management team that was there before, as in my senior team that was there before 2016. We do want to make sure that it's a clean sweep, and we do want to make sure there is a clean brush to go through here, and we'll do that. And I genuinely believe that we can work together to move this business forward.
Right, thank you, Nick.
Just make a point, Jim, and push back a little bit gently on you as well, Cam, if I may. I mean, very few people go to work to do a bad job. And that includes politicians as well as all the rest of the UK population. So in terms of the government didn't do anything until the ITV series, I will push back on that. Clearly 2019 was a seminal moment. 2020, we put in place a compensation scheme. 2020, we put in place an inquiry. 2021, we made it a statutory inquiry. We put in further compensation schemes in terms of the GLO, overturning those convictions. Last year, before the dramatisation, we put in place a Horizon Compensation Advisory Board with Lord Arbuthnot, Kevin Jones, to make sure that we had rigour in terms of holding us to account. We brought forward the Fixed Sum Award for £600,000 for people with overturned convictions, all before the ITV series. Now, has that made a difference in terms of us being able to negotiate with Treasury and other parts of government in terms of getting the things we want? Yes, of course. Has it made a difference to government? Yes, of course. We're public servants. We respond to public outcry. So, of course, it's helped move things forward. But people were trying to do the right thing before that. And when we're looking at the post office, I got involved in this post office thing back in 2020, not because I had a postmaster, but because I was involved in the banking scandals. These are not isolated to an organisation like the post office, these corporate failures. Do we need to deal with them? Yes, we do. Do we need to do them more effectively, more quickly? Yeah, absolutely we do. But I believe, and you may say I'm wrong, and you may decide we should change this brand and change the colour or change the name, whatever you want to do. That's up to you, I think. I'm not resisting that. I don't think the post office at a local level is damaged. I think all this stuff is redeemable. The things at the very heart of it is making sure you have profitable businesses. That is the value then for solving your problem. Can I sell this business? If people feel, yes, this is something I want to be involved in and it makes profit, then you'll get those businesses have value. And that's what we are focused on to make sure that is the case wherever possible around the country.
Thank you. Right, you've sat quite quietly, Darren. What would your assessment of what's been said?
Yeah, I just wanted to reinforce what Calum said, really. I mean, it's difficult for me to make any direct comparisons to the Horizon scandal or the crisis with BP. But I think that the best example from a Timpson perspective came in 2002 when our CEO, James Timpson, took the decision to employ ex-offenders and prison leavers. Now, at the time, it was a huge risk. There was a huge risk for reputational damage and a huge risk to our bottom line. We got lots of adverse press. We got lots of silly alliterative headlines in the Daily Mail, killer cobblers cut keys or murderer Melton Mowbray, all this sort of nonsense. But to our credit, we kind of ignored it. I mean, the real sort of concern for us at the time was people trust us to cut the keys. People give us the house keys. They'll leave them with us while they go shopping. And obviously the sort of lazy inference was that, well, are we going to be employing burglars to cut people's house keys? But to be fair, we kind of weathered that storm. We ignored all the adverse press. We brought the public along with us. We certainly brought our colleagues along with us on that journey, and we've turned a potential negative into a huge positive. James Timpson is very, very prevalent on social media. He's got 300,000 followers, and every time James sends a tweet which is related to our inclusive approach to recruitment, it might be that I visited Birmingham today, and 3 of the 4 branch managers that I met have all just left prison and were brought to us through the Timpson Foundation. Now, James will on a regular basis get 100,000 likes to that comment. He'll get tens of thousands of very positive comments along the line of, James, we love your inclusive approach to recruitment. This is why we always use the Timpson business. So again, it's not a direct sort of comparative, but it's just an indication of how things can improve. So what we've managed to do is sort of take that potential hit to our reputation and turn it into a positive. So whilst your brand has undoubtedly been damaged, in my opinion, it can certainly improve.
Right, thank you, Darren. It's interesting because there's one comparison there that actually James he's out there, albeit on social media, but he's very public facing. You know, if we were to ask the general public, who, you know, could we ask you, do you know the CEO of the Post Office? Who do you know who he is? How many would answer? Nick Read. Could it be that you need to be a little bit more closer to your customers, Nick? You know.
I had 152,000 mentions in the second week in February, so I'll be brutally honest and say quite a few people probably do.
It probably helps that James Timpson's surname's Timpson as well. It gives a connection between that and the brand a bit.
Yeah. We've got a question from Sue. Sue Edgar.
Good morning, Conference. Sue Edgar, North East Region. It's a question really for the Minister and for Nick Read. Damaged brand, you think it's not irreparably damaged. Well, I'm afraid it is. And the people trust us, the postmasters, mistresses. It's not the brand, it's us they trust. And you talk about going onto Banking Framework 4. In my opinion, first of all, the billions that the banks are saving, they should be paying for every office to have a note counting machine, not you taking it out of our money, which you are doing because you're delaying the back office payments. But also, when you're negotiating with the banks that have saved all this money, we want a payment given to us, not of pennies, we want some pounds on the table, because we are saving them, as you say, billions. So therefore, we deserve some of those billions.
Thank you, Sue. I would imagine that the banks are quite difficult to negotiate with, Nick. And could the way forward be actual legislation?
Well, there will be legislation. I mean, there will be legislation. Let's be clear. But also, you know, part of my job is to make sure that I mobilise the Treasury, that I mobilise the department, that I mobilise other ministers to make sure that they support us in this drive. And it's really important. And the minister has been extremely clear and very vociferous on this particular topic. Absolutely believes that if the banks are saving £3 billion a year in terms of from their physical estates, then clearly that responsibility that's been handed to the post office needs to be paid for, and we're very, very clear about that. And if you look at the reduction in cost of running a bank branch versus running either a banking hub or indeed an enhanced office, it's something like a 90% reduction in cost. So some of that saving has to come to the post office, and that's part of our Banking Framework 4 negotiations, and we're very clear about that. They will push back hard. Many of you will remember how Barclays behaved at the end of Banking Framework 2 and Banking Framework 3. It was disgraceful, frankly, and that will happen again, be assured. But I'm also quite clear that we've got good support and good understanding amongst my government colleagues, and we'll make sure that if we have to legislate, we have to legislate. UK Finance will push us hard, and they're the people who negotiate on behalf of the banks, but they're not afraid to legislate, and the Treasury have told me they're not afraid to legislate to make sure that actually cash survives on the high street and that we are the providers of that cash.
Thank you, Nick. Begs the question again, and we've touched on this before. In negotiations with banks, what part of the process do you involve postmasters? What part of the process do you involve the Federation, for instance? And, you know, what is the level of transparency? You know, obviously there's commercial confidentiality, but there should be at least a certain level of transparency so that our colleagues can be confident that you're acting in their best behalf, you know, on their...
Yeah, no, I think it's an entirely reasonable question. I think, you know, there are a few things here, I suppose, that, and we talked about this a little bit before we came into the conference. We've spent a lot of time trying to invest in regional forums, a lot of time trying to invest in our sort of what do we call them, listening groups, our branch operational forums, the way that we engage with postmasters and trying to bring that to life and trying to make sure it's not the same old, same old. I was at the listening group up in Leeds last week. I was at the listening group in London the week before. I'm doing 2 a month for the next 5 months. I want to hear what people have got to say, and I want people to see me in a more relaxed environment where they can engage with me, and that's very, very important. I think it is very important. We've got the Adopt an Area programme that we're refreshing to make sure that senior leaders are out in the network on a quarterly basis engaging with postmasters, bringing ideas back to the centre and for us to play them back. We haven't been great at playing them back, I'll be honest with you. I've always been, and many of you will know, I grew up in Tesco, and it was very important for us to say, you said, we did, or we didn't do, and be very transparent about it. We've not been great with that, and we need to get better at it, and that's something that we propose to do. One of my great concerns, and what I think is really refreshing about the conference today, is we tend to talk to the same people. There are lots of people who are really engaged in the post office, a small number of postmasters, and then there are a lot of people who are really disengaged, but are quite keen to share their views. There's a huge tranche in the middle who we don't get to, we don't hear their ideas, and we need to hear more of that. My personal view is that peer-to-peer is the way forward here. You don't want to hear from me the whole time. You don't want to hear from Martin and Sean and Pete and others. You want to hear from those in the network that are doing great things and getting it right. And I don't think we as a post office team facilitate and coordinate that. And I think the NFSP have got a great role to play in doing this so that we get more peer-to-peer engagement, because I think that is personally the way that we will improve our business and generate better ideas.
Thank you. Calum.
I think I'm very supportive of the government's plans in relation to money laundering and anti-terrorism. And the last thing that we want is for our network to be used by individuals in relation to how they have accessed their funds. And obviously the Treasury and Home Office did a report back in 2020 in relation to how actually money laundering was being used, and they found a weakness actually in essence within the Post Office network. And I don't think we are doing enough, honestly, in relation to the compliance things like that. And let's be honest, we get asked 10 questions once a year, and to be honest, we could answer those questions with our eyes closed. And I think we need to do more. And I think as a business, we need to be far more as part of the fight against. At this moment in time, I do not know. Someone might come into my post office, they might go into the neighbouring post offices. I don't know that that's actually happening. And therefore, actually, that could be money laundering that's going on, but I don't know. And I think there's so much more that we could actually be doing. But I think as Sue is highlighting, that there is, as far as the financial aspect, and I think that's part of the problem, is that some postmasters will see banking is very important to them. But actually for others, they won't see it as necessarily generating, and therefore the investment for their staff, etc., into that. So that's where the weakness comes in. And I think actually, for me, we need to upskill everybody. And I hear what
you're saying. It's a really interesting question, because at the end of the day, what we don't want is to have to regulate the post office as a banking entity, because with that comes extraordinary bureaucracy, enormous amounts of compliance, and a lot of cost. However, I also fully recognise, and particularly in a cost of living crisis as we are at the moment, you are going to see more money laundering, you're going to see more issues in terms of cash, and raises questions around security. Getting that balance right between legislation around anti-money laundering, driving harder compliance, whilst at the same time making sure that we don't become a regulated entity, I think is quite important. And the second part of this equation, which I think is a bit of a frustration to us in the post office, is of course, don't forget the customers who come in to transact, who are banking customers, are not our customers. We don't have their data. And that makes it very difficult for us from an AML perspective to actually engage with these individuals. We don't know who they are, because at the end of the day, we don't have their data. And so that's the pushback that we have with UK Finance, that we have with the government on this, and also that we have with the banks. Is there a way forward? I think that will be part of our negotiation with the banks.
But I do think we could do more, actually, as far as banking services, beyond just, and I think that's part of the problem, is the banks see us as a bit of a weakness, so therefore they're less likely to necessarily want to instill other services that we could provide. And I think, we can do far more than simply accepting cash or paying cash out. We talked about the front office of government. We could be the front office of banks. As the banks sort of actually clear out of the high street, we remain.
We would love to have the banking data. That would put a completely different complexion on this business. But of course, as you can imagine, the last thing the banks want to do is give that up. So they want to hold us to account for money laundering, but they don't want to give us the data. And so that's a very difficult trade-off, and obviously one that I talk to them about a lot.
Okay, can I just respond to Sue? I mean, I think your point about trust in the postmasters is absolutely the point, and that's what we're going to capitalise on. That's the opportunity. So I do think, however we look at it going forward, that's the strength of the post office, and we should capitalise on it. In terms of the banks, not only do they have a financial requirement to support the banking framework, because we've legislated for it, access to cash, which has been designed to support the network, let's face it, and which is good news, but they've also got a moral obligation. These are the communities we all rely upon as a UK citizen. So the bank should see this as something where they can really give something back to society, which is something that could give them some credibility themselves in this space. So I do think it's an opportunity. That's why we've been clear, I've said countless times on the floor of the House and in the media and whatever, and to the banks themselves, that they should be paying a lot more into the pot, having saved the billions of pounds they've saved, both morally and financially, obligation to do that. And I agree with you entirely in terms of working more closely. You know, this stuff on cash deposits was absolutely unfair, and lots of independent traders who couldn't bank their cash. And to evolve a trusted trader scheme around that, it was just tying everybody with the same brush, which is not untypical of some of our regulators. They see a problem and they just use a blunderbuss approach rather than a targeted approach to this. So those kind of relationships should improve to make sure that customers can have confidence when they go in the post office and clear the revenue opportunities that emanate from that.
Thank you, Minister. We've got one last burning question on this subject from Alan. Microphone, please. Yeah.
Alan Knight, South East Region. You mentioned that the banking is obviously very precious to the post office, but there's very little investment from POL for us to actually do that service. We have banks up and down the high streets closing with all the facilities, all the counting machines being put in a skip. Why are we not actually investing in these counting machines, allowing us to actually do the function of the banks? You know, I was here yesterday and looked at a machine that was £1,900 that could actually count the notes and actually pull out fraudulent notes. I've got 2 mains, 11 outreaches and a fixed kit. That's 14 branches. I can't spend £1,900 on counting machines. The investment for us to do this banking service has to come within. You need to actually invest in these our main branches and the local branches, because they're counting. You know, we're turning over a couple of my branches nearly £250,000 a month. That's for the POL, but that's physically being counted by hand. You know, we need your investment. You know, talk is cheap. Machines are expensive.
No, they are.
Right, thank you, Alan. Yeah, if you could, Nick, does the post office have any strategy for that going forward?
Well, we're rolling out 3,200 counting machines this year, as you know. I think the question around what is the bank doing with its kit is an interesting question, and I will follow up on that, because I think there may be something to look at. But you know, in terms of from a funding perspective, I absolutely agree. And the issue that we're going to have here is if we don't get the banks to pay for it, then the government will have to support us to do so, because you know, clearly there is a social as well as an economic reason for us to keep hold of cash. And if we can't win the argument with the banks, and we should be able to win the argument with the banks, then of course we're going to have to look elsewhere. So I agree with you entirely, if that's the role that we want to play.
Right. Postmasters moving up and down the high street who know the banks, begging for
their kit.
Yeah. Their kit.
Yeah.
It's not our responsibility.
No, it's not. No, I agree with that.
Right, thank you. Right, we're going to have to move quickly on. We've kind of run over a little bit, but that's okay. So we'll move on to, as final topic, is ethics and culture within the whole organisation, within the whole network, not just Post Office Limited and government. I'm talking about the whole of the network as a whole. So we'll kick off with a question from Mohammed Zafar.
My question is, Post Office always talks about the mental well-being of postmasters. Yet due to low remuneration, sometimes postmasters are not even able to take a day off for hospital appointments, spend time with family, or to sometimes go even on short holidays. Many of us don't even achieve a national minimum wage. In addition, are there any plans from the Post Office or the government to introduce any holiday entitlement for postmasters or any new services to increase our future remuneration?
Thank you. Thank you. I think we'll kick off with Nick.
I don't think there's any plan to introduce holiday that I'm aware of, so I'll be straight about that now. We've talked obviously a lot over the last hour or so about the opportunities to drive remuneration and how we improve it and increase it. The Minister and I have talked a lot about this. I'm absolutely clear. Let's be frank. Nothing that gets generated in the Post Office goes in the form of dividends out to the shareholder. So the government doesn't take a dividend from the Post Office at any stage, nor has it done. So what we generate in terms of our trading profit goes back either into the business or it goes into the rates that we pay we pay out to postmasters. A couple of thoughts on that. I mean, first and foremost, we made some good profit from our online business, and I wanted to share that with you, and we were very clear about that. So there was the one-off payment in March. It generated somewhere in the region of 15%, I think, of your April income. I want to do more of that. I think it's the right thing to do. We talked a lot about how the brand on the ground drives the brand online, and I think it's important that we do that. It won't be such a successful year this year. We won't have the same level of profits, but nonetheless, that's important. So that's point one. Point two, we've obviously come up with a package in March, the £30 million package that was a combination of ensuring that RMG paid for the services that they provide, plus a range of other different measures to make sure that we have a package that hopefully you can see that we are genuinely trying to improve the long-term profitability and the long-term remuneration of postmasters. So that was important too. And we will now have a yearly cycle where we always do that in March in a much more cohesive and coherent way. As part of the strategic review, as we said before, we will look at the commerciality of the business and make sure that we drive the top line as well as find ways to take costs out of the business. And by driving the top line, we mean specifically looking at the rates that we pay on banking, on mails, and on the other products and services as well. And just to be clear, we talked a little bit about DVLA earlier on. We will not engage either with government or indeed with any other services to do work that is going to be below minimum wage or below cost. It just doesn't make sense. And so that's why we pushed back extremely hard with DVLA on this, and we got a win, which, it wasn't a big win, but it was a win nonetheless, and we will continue to do that. I'm absolutely clear we will not take on work from any government agency that is either below cost or below the minimum wage, and we will continue to do that as well.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. I don't think you actually answered the question about it. I don't think mental well-being of postmasters is all due to remuneration. I think it's more complex than that. Darren, just how important to Timpson's is the ethics and culture within the organisation? Just explain briefly.
It's incredibly important. I mean, we realised some time ago that it's people before profits is kind of our mantra. And kind of underpins our culture. Yes, we're a commercial business. Yes, we don't shy away from that. We are very commercial. But without good people in the business who feel valued, who feel part of something bigger, we simply wouldn't have a business and we wouldn't be as successful as we are. In terms of some of the benefits, both the financial benefits and welfare benefits that we provide our colleagues, we understand that people face challenges. There's a cost of living crisis. People are struggling with their mental health, and we've put things in place so we can help our colleagues. One of the things we've put in place more recently is that we've employed 2 full-time counsellors. We have mental health first aiders all over the country, which our colleagues can access. But for me, the most important thing kind of about our culture, which feeds into this, is essentially we've introduced accountability. So going back 20 years now, we introduced something called a Happy Index, which we spoke about yesterday. And this is an opportunity for all of our colleagues to rate the senior managers within our business. Our area managers are important people within our business. They cover large geographical areas of the country. They might have 50, 60 branches with a couple of hundred colleagues in each area. This is across all the main brands, Timpson, Max Spielman and Johnson's. And every year, our colleagues are asked to rate their area managers. And we treat it very seriously, as we discussed yesterday. We fire people. If our senior managers aren't looking after our colleagues, aren't there for them in terms of supporting them, not just the sort of more business kind of support that they need, but the welfare as well. We take it very seriously. And I think the way we ensure that is real and forms such a big part of our culture is that we don't allow our area managers to mark their own homework. These Happy Indexes are anonymous and they get given to our HR director, who will speak to the area managers, depends on the results. So, yeah, that's how we do it.
Yeah. Could I just ask, sorry, yeah, thank you. Could I just ask you to sort of elaborate? Is this culture self-perpetuated within the group? Or is it actually actively nurtured?
I think it's both. I think initially it was actively nurtured. We made lots of changes when we brought in upside down management. But I think now it grows kind of organically. Our colleagues don't want to work with people who are negative, who are draining. They want to work with positive people who are ambitious, who are forward-thinking, who very much buy into our culture of kindness and compassion. They want to offer first-class customer service. And they want to do things for the community, which we help them to do, through our Captain Cash scheme, through our charitable matching scheme. So again, for us, it's making our colleagues feel part of something bigger. You've all seen our branches outside the supermarket. Some of them are quite small, they're like posh garden sheds, which we've kind of plonked in a car park. So it can be quite isolating, but we work very hard to make sure that our colleagues are engaged through our Timpson Group news, through our WhatsApp groups, through regular visits from our area teams, regular social events, conferences, training, etc., etc. So for us, it's kind of organically grown, and it's very important to us that our colleagues feel part of something bigger.
Right, thank you. I think, Nick, I mean, there's obviously, there's, you know, you cannot deny that there's a certain unrest in the network and unrest. And, you know, could it be that the ethics and culture is the place to start? You know, how do you feel about that?
I think the question of providing feedback for area managers is a really interesting one. I think that's a barometer that we should explore. So, as an example, I think we had 1,902 people responded to the postmaster survey last month. There are over 700 verbatim comments. I've read them all, and I will always do that because it gives me an indication of what the direction of travel is and where people are nervous and where people are concerned. Mainly it was communication and engagement were the two things that struck out, notwithstanding remuneration, of course. It was how we communicate and how we engage, and that was something that struck me. People didn't really know in that survey what they meant by that, but they knew it wasn't quite right, in the sense that I didn't feel I got a whole wave of really clear and precise ways that we could improve it, but I could tell, to your point, I could tell that people were anxious and there was something not quite working from a comms and engagement perspective. We've tried lots of different ways, whether it's Martin's one memo on a weekly basis, whether it's using Branch Hub, whether it's using WhatsApp groups, whether it's more broad communication from regional forums. It's clearly not quite right yet, and that's something that we need to work on. I think the idea of bottom-up management in the way that you're describing in terms of holding people to account is really interesting. Just for your benefit, one of the things that I've instigated this year in the centre is that every single one of the senior leadership team has to have a 360-degree feedback mechanism, which is their bosses, their peers, and then people who work for them. And that forms part of their year-end appraisal. And so that top 100 will have had 10 individual pieces of anonymous feedback that their line manager will use as part of the process to assess their performance at the year end. So it's anonymized, so there is no hiding. And I think it's important that we're much more transparent, and the top 100, as I say, in the organization will get that kind of feedback, and that will be the basis upon how they are assessed. So not just assessed on what they have done, but more importantly, and I mean this, more importantly on how they have done it, how they've gone about doing it. And that's something that is extremely important to me in making sure that we create the right culture and the right values in our business.
Thank you, Nick.
Can
Calum.
I just say,
I'm going to call Calum. Sorry,
Okay.
I'm going to call Calum. Could I can guarantee you're next after Calum, right? Right? Yeah. Calum, what part do you think the Federation has to play in driving this necessary change of culture? Because there obviously needs to be. I mean, we can all recognise that. Yeah. But really, as an organisation, you know, we can't not get involved. We're there to represent postmasters, and that's exactly what we should be doing. So how do you see a Federation can ensure change?
Right. Well, I think sort of, you know, if I may sort of just deal directly with the question, which is in essence was in relation to mental well-being and rest. Rest is vitally important, and as someone who is in essence running and driving their business, as self-employed individuals, you're not entitled to rest. Your staff are, or I'll rephrase that, your colleagues are, and that is vitally sort of important. And the government recognises that and puts the legislation sort of in as far as that is concerned, but you don't. One of the best services that the NFSP provides is actually its HR function via HR for UK. And via HR for UK, not only can you have free access to any type of support as far as your staff is concerned, but we also, via that, provide a relief scheme. And that is there for all postmasters so that they can actually have a rest. And what they do is they assess anyone who is registered with them is actually able to run your office so that you can have time off, you can have rest. And I think actually, to be honest, Nick, it's something sort of that we need to be really promoting far, far more. Within the post office, there's a lovely gentleman called Martin Hofcroft, and I'm sure you would agree. And he has a role and a responsibility as far as mental sort of health right across, not just within the post office, but right across the network. And again, I think sort of we need to give more cognizance to Martin and the work he's doing. Within the NFSP, a lovely, lovely lady, and I'm looking at her just now and she's going to say, shut up, Calum. Christine Donnelly is as the non-executive director, she has a responsibility for care for customer and colleagues. All about mental health, it's all about mental well-being. We need to do far more about that to actually make sure that you're okay, because actually if you're not getting the rest, if you are physically and mentally exhausted, you're not going to be making the right decisions. And actually, you're going to be sort of under stress, and actually the whole aspect of your well-being as far as how you deal with your family, how you deal with your friends, how you deal sort of with your customers is actually going to be impacted. And this is why sort of actually what Darren said yesterday was so important. Timpson's actually, as he highlighted, they put sort of actually their people before profits. Everything that they are doing is about making sure that their colleagues feel good and feel as if they're part of something. And part of something big, and that's something sort of where actually I don't think we are doing enough. And it's there, but I don't think we're really giving it the prominence that actually Timpson's do. And actually, I don't think we're getting the benefit that Timpson's are getting from it. So that is something that we need to, definitely an action point. So I'm looking to the table to the left. It's definitely an action point that needs to come out of this conference in relation to that. So, but how can we as an organisation help and change the culture, sort of not only within the post office, but within the network? I outlined yesterday in relation to a culture committee, and I make no secret of the fact that I'm stealing that from Timpson's, because that's what they sort of do. I'd love to sort of introduce Cut the Crap committee as well. I'd love to sort of be able to put that sort of into the post office. But the reality sort of is that sort of when it comes to the culture, we have to be able to drive that. We have to be able to sort of work on that. As far as the culture within the post office is concerned, there's no secret. Again, I outlined yesterday in relation to the oversight committee. I do believe, like the Minister, that actually mutualisation is actually the way forward when it's the right time. I don't believe at this moment in time it's actually the right time. I don't think the business is actually sort of in a good enough financial position. I don't think the selling market that we're in is in a stable enough sort of financial position. And I don't think without the fantastic support that sort of actually the government gives, £2.5 billion since 2012, actually we would be able to introduce but we'd be able to sort of fund sort of the legal costs of the inquiry and a whole host of other things. So we need the continual ongoing support sort of the government, and obviously mutualisation would cut that off, and we would actually have to be dealing with all of that ourselves. But I do think sort of from a cultural perspective we can make the changes that does not undermine the role of the minister sort of within the business. It doesn't undermine the role of the strategic board, and it doesn't undermine sort of the management. I think we can all work together. I think collaboration is far more important than sort of separation. I do sort of think rather than actually having a bone-on-bone adversarial relationship, actually, if we would actually just work together, we could actually do so many more things. The passion that you have for this business, the passion you have for your communities is invaluable, it's priceless. And I think there's more that we could actually do to be very much front and centre of that.
Right, thank you, Calum. We'll come back to the Minister.
Thanks, Tim. Well, in my business life, I was really proud to lead an organisation that people were proud to be members of. I'm talking about our franchisees. And that's where we need to get back to. That's where we need to get back to for this network. And it's a sad thing to hear that some of you maybe don't feel proud of the network. Some people ask me, bear in mind there's quite a lot attached to this job right now in terms of Minister for Postal Affairs. You know, you must see that as it must be a bit of a poison chalice for you. I don't look at that at all. I look at it as a wonderful opportunity to be able to do something constructive, both in terms of fixing the past and in terms of giving it a future. So I'm very proud of the brand. And, you know, we do need to, we've got to accept, though, there's been some significant failures in the past in terms of leadership of this organisation. And we'd want to change that for the future. There's been great work being done around the area managers, about the work you're doing in terms of the listing groups, in terms of the engagement, the non-exec directors, all those things. Of course, people say we need to improve on those things, and we're very happy to have that conversation. But things are improving, in my view, in terms of that engagement. And we've got a new chair coming in to support Nick, Nigel Railton. I have a great respect for, and I think he'll be a great fit for the business, and will really help in terms of trying to make sure you do feel in the future you're part of this. You're not something you're being subjected to. So I do think we can fix all this, but I'm not saying it's going to be easy, and I'm not shy away from that challenge either. In terms of the point about mental health, of course, part of that is about feeling the organisation you work for, and do you feel valued by that organisation? That is absolutely critical that you do. And I'd find it very difficult to deal with a situation, people who have been members of my organisation when I ran a business that didn't feel that way. So we definitely need to fix those things, and part of those things we are fixing as we speak. The other thing, I think, in terms of mental health, of course, being in business is tough. You know, people don't understand who are not in business how tough it is. I think I have this theory, actually, as business people, well, like me anyway, I was quite lazy. I wanted to go into business to work half the hours to earn twice the money. Actually, when I went into business, I realised you work twice the hours for half the money. And that's the reality. But we want to make sure you can see a future to where you are running those profitable businesses. You can take time off. You can afford to take time off and employ people to give you a break, to spend time with your family. Of course, being in business, one of the most important parts of it, aside from being able to hopefully make a decent profit, is to have independence, that you're accountable to yourself. That's what my dad always told me. That's why you want to be in business. You're your own boss. So it wants to be a place where you can take the opportunity to have more time with your family, not less, as well as earn a decent living.
Thank you, Kevin. Right, time's very, very pressing, and I'm going to let you have, as you're the Postal Services Minister, I'm going to let you have the last say. And the question is from me. I've taken on the thing, but it's my question now. In the past, the government has been quoted, the post office is an arm's length entity, despite the fact that the actual government is the shareholder. How, moving forward, are you going to actually measure the post office's performance? How are you going to actually get sense check, feeling in the network. And how are you going to actually have oversight and become more involved and hold the post office to account? And I don't just mean the post office, I mean the network as a whole. Hold us to account. What is the government's strategy going forward? Because I feel that sort of mentality in the past is actually part of the problem.
Well, some of those challenges are operational challenges that we Nick's responsibility, making sure people feel valued and whatever metrics you use for that and engagement. And as I said before, there's some work going on in that in terms of things like the area managers. But I'd ask a question back to you, Tim, if I may, is that do you want us to be more involved? Because if you want to go down a route of mutualisation, which I support, that's less involvement from government. I'd have thought that's what you'd want. Clearly there has to be some relationship between us in terms of whether network size or, in terms of service delivery. Of course, those things. But if that's something you want to happen, I think it can happen, but it'll mean less involvement from me and people like me.
But at this moment in time, right, the network and the whole setup is just not capable of mutualisation.
Well, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. I mean, I know what you're saying, Calum. You're right. You talk about the challenges, things like Horizon Replacement NBIT. You're talking about the compensation bill, of course. You're talking about some of the uncertainties about the future in terms of the network and services and people coming through the door. But, I think there's a way, I could see a way where we could ring fence some of those problems and so the government underwrites those problems. Because the actual trading performance of the business itself is, it's commercially plausible that this could separate off independently from government. So I think there's ways, we're not thinking it's got to be a 10-year horizon or something. I think realistically, given the right strategic view of this and the right strategy going forward, I think mutualisation could happen much more quickly than that 10-year period. It could be a case of a year or two rather than thinking it's got to be 10 years. So I don't think it's a pipe dream at all to think about mutualisation or any other government. I'm not saying you'd no, but I don't think it's something that's always out of reach. I think it's within reach, and I think it's something we should realistically pursue.
Right, thank you. I'm sure our members will hold you to that at some point.
I need to be able to account, Tim.
Well, we know we know that there will be a general election sometime this year. I wouldn't like to sort of speculate what will happen in that. Right, folks, I'm sorry. We'd probably like to go on a lot more, but time is very pressing. So I would like to first thank Kevin Hollinrake, the Postal Services Minister, for his participation today. Also, Nick Read, thank you for coming. Calum Greenhow, Calum, and obviously Darren Burns for his insightful, and also you, the membership. I'm very, very proud. You've conducted yourself very well and very respectful. So when it comes to feedback, you tell us what you think about this format. I think it's worked very, very well today, and it's been very productive. Thank you very much.